Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the first 2024 Spring Rights Literary Festival Zoom event. I'm Robin Schwartz. I'm the Community Arts Partnership Program and Grant Director. We are in Ithaca, New York, and our organization is in Tompkins County. The Spring Rights Literary Festival is one of our annual programs. We've got the Greater Ithaca Art Trail, the Ithaca Artists Market, the Cap Art Space, and the Capapalooza Art Sale. I am not sorry I named it Capapalooza Art Sale, even though people think it's very funny. I think it attracts attention. We also have 5 arts grants programs for Tompkins County artists and not-for-profits. This year alone, we have distributed $575,000 of state, county, and foundation money for hundreds of local events. And since 1993, that number has been over 6.6 million distributed. So that's how awesome we are. There are 9 additional Zoom events through the 18th, and you've all seen them because you all had to register on the Zoom page, all free. And there's workshops that are going through August. Before we jump into tonight's event, please stay on mute throughout the event. Feel free to use the chat heavily. We love to see engagement in chat. I will be monitoring the chat in case anyone has any questions or problems. Your bathrooms are down the hall. We are recording this session. And I'll put springrights.org in the chat and also artspartner.org in the chat. That's our main website. So before I turn it over, I'd like to thank our wonderful Spring Rights sponsors. Because of our sponsors, Spring Rights has a total of 40 free events, and we can pay the artists. So that's amazing. The sponsors are Ithaca College, Wegmans, M&T Bank, CFCU Community Credit Union, the Odyssey Bookstore, and the Ithaca Marriott. We received grant support from Poets and Writers and from Tompkins County Tourism Program. Our media sponsors are The Root, WI Teach Radio, WSKG, and Cinemapolis. So yay. And now I'm going to turn the spotlight over to Anthony Di Renzo. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, benvenuto a tutti. From the city of the 7 hills to the city of the 3 hills. The second weekend of the Spring Rights Literary Festival coincides with the last weekend of the Azalea Festival in Rome. So to celebrate spring, the Eternal City decks out the Spanish Steps with all different colors of azaleas, as you see here. And in many ways, this gathering today is a kind of literal anthology, a garden of blooming insights in words and images about the Eternal City. So we're all members of the Department of Writing at Ithaca College. We all have a deep love for the city of Rome that we've either just come to know or have fallen in love with and have been visiting for many, many years. So we represent prose and poetry. We'll start with poetry first. And I would like to turn over the mic and the spotlight to my dear colleague, Eric Machan.
Thank you very much, Antonio, and thank you for everybody for being here, and to my colleagues who I'll be sharing some words with this evening. What I decided to do tonight is read 7 poems. These were all started in Rome in January at the beginning of this year. Katharyn and I went with the Vermont College of Fine Arts on a writing immersion trip for a bit of time. And just like traveling anywhere for me, when you move away from the ordinary and you travel to other countries, everything becomes extraordinary. So the senses are just firing on all cylinders. And so these are poems and pictures that I took during that trip, and I'm just going to read through them without much introduction. So let me get my slideshow set. All right, and hopefully everybody can see the picture of the cat. To the Manx in the ruins. Largo, Argentina. He looks up to greet visitors who travel thousands of miles just to prove the tales of huge cats cared for by Romans, or offer their hands to the mouth of truth, Boca della Verita. He met my eye when he heard the squeaky kiss leave my lips, and as he turned away, I saw no tail behind him as he hobbled away awkwardly like a crab trying to climb a smooth stone. As his back legs lagged behind, I saw God in his black fur, who told me not to stop trying, to always stay out of my own shadow. Cacio e Pepe. 4 young women in black sit beside us in the restaurante, posing for their followers with forkfuls of pasta raised to their glossy lips. They laugh at their beauty before shoveling twisted knots into their mouths and slurping the ends of bucatini beyond their whitened teeth. Their cheeks are full of cherubs waiting for love, and their eyes are lined with catacombs and crypts. They avoid looking at us eating the same dish, drinking the same wine. Our table teeters on the uneven tiles, and all the young, handsome waiters hover over these women beside us like moths, shimmering in the artificial love of electric light. In Vatican City, pigeons dip their beaks into small pools formed by lepers thrashing about in fountains fashioned so the gods and goddesses can see themselves as they look down from Mount Etna. This is a place where healing is sought, where the stones of old pyramids have been reshaped into massive steps that rise to altars of incense and crucifixes, where hidden choirs chant forgiveness over and over to tourists and pilgrims. This museum holds the spoils of victory close to its chest, like a mother holds her baby close to her breast. Statues from Greece, Egypt, Turkey, and other lands line marble hall after marble hall. Precious artifacts cataloged, indexed, and archived under the same roof where blood is shed daily and manna slips under the tongues of believers like tectonic plates jockeying to destabilize all civilization. Syzygy. A woman in black floats near me from behind, steering a cigarette down Via Murlana, just as Dominican nuns, shining in bright white, walk toward me from the opposite direction. And when we come into alignment, it is as if doves fall from the sky, wine turns to water, and mummified saints rise from church altars and leave their stations to beg alms from tourists who lose themselves on streets intermittently marked with unfamiliar names. Doorways. This has a little quote at the beginning. Not all doors open in the same direction with the same effort. Jasleen Kaur Gumber. Doorways. In Rome, impossibly large doors almost touch the clouds, each adorned with ornate knockers fashioned by hands long lost to the 7 hills. My father was as imposing, wrought by his time from some dark metal and twisted into shape while red hot for striking. As I glimpse the mouth of my grave, his image tarnishes, as does the brutal way he tried to forge me into his manhood. The vestibule of the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore is big enough for God to pass through. It takes 1,000 hands to open, and still I cannot enter by myself without fearing his face in every contorted gargoyle, silenced by a solid cast hoop stuck in its mouth. found. I lost my hat in a church after being reminded to take it off by a docent. I was watching a confession when it dropped silently to the ancient mosaic floor, and then I moved to hear an enormous pipe organ beginning to bellow more hymns to God from some hidden loft within this holy space, where a soprano curved her tone like the dome of the basilica in singing the power of the goddess. This gigantic space swallows all that is lost and found in Rome. My hat eventually appeared, placed neatly on a bench near the altar, and a statue of Moses with the horns of a demon. And lastly, to the strawberry on the sidewalk, shining fresh red like a new sin. What forgiveness do you have for me? Yet another lost soul chained tight to the rock of their own making. And thank you very much, folks. I am now going to pass it to colleague, poet, spouse, Dr. Katharyn Machan.
Good to hear you, beloved. Took me, well, I'd say more than 60 years to finally get to the city that I'd learned about as a little girl, the mythology in particular. What I did not expect was coming in dazed from difficult flight, because flights daze people now. In the cab, I look out the window and what do I see? Am I hallucinating? Up in a tree is the most brilliant green bird you could ever imagine. Green birds that I'm used to seeing in Key West, but in Rome, what is this green bird doing? And I learned through the cab driver that several decades ago, what I report in this poem occurred. Parakeets escaped, abandoned, left to fend alone. The first ones found each other in the trees that offered refuge high above Rome's stone and riddled marble. Winter's sunless breeze and summer's weight did not defeat them. Eggs emerged and hatched, and mate by brilliant mate, they kept creating bellies, breasts, and legs, clear eyes, curved beaks, cries to communicate. So wild, called rose-ringed monk, two species free of wire cages, yet content to stay near iron fences where their lives can be untouched as they fly loudly every day. Firm branches offer berries, red and sweet, to help green wings survive street after street. In the Church of San Pietro in Vincoli, I was mesmerized by the creatures I'm writing about in here. Were they once human? Were they forged of stone? Oh, no. The holy skeletons. We may have left our flesh behind, but here we are in Rome, a small bird's squawk away from Moses with his horns of light. What year did fate transform us? Who can sanely say in this pale marble church where even now slim dark-gazed men wield brush and paint to cover up time's wear? You may ask how, since none of us has earned the title saint. We are aware when we are only bone and air. Oh, silly living humans, you move quickly now, and even when alone, take little time to ponder what is true. In our serenity, we need no breath to give our grinning thanks to sacred death. It probably was when I was 15 or 16 years old, I first encountered the poetry of Keats. Liked it. You know, you're emerging as a poet yourself. You enjoy, you try to read as much as you can. But it was at the College of St. Rose. I had a beloved professor who was one of the foremost Keats scholars in the United States, Dr. Swaminathan. He liked being at that small college because I let him teach what he wanted to teach, and it was peaceful there in Albany, New York for him. So to be in the room where John Keats died, and I was alone. Other people were in other places in the small dwelling, and I'm looking out the window, but knowing in the bed that they hold there, this man had died after creating so much we still hold sacred, even though he died so very young at 26. Keats, to touch the window where he last sought sky, to trace the stone that darkens with his name. I'm journeying to Rome before I die and leave behind a ripple of small fame. For more than 50 years I've loved his lines, since to my ears good teachers brought to me awareness of words' beauty, truth's designs they honored as the art of poetry. Do I expect a vision, a close voice, pale lips to smile and offer ageless rhyme, because I too am poet, heart's clear choice to shape all days with language through my time? I have no need to find a ghostly face. Enough for me to sense his spirit's grace. And of course, very famously, in the small, quiet cemetery where Keats is buried, is the carving on his gravestone, which he asked be placed there. Here lies one whose name was writ in water. February 24th, 1821. Via Cao Sestio. Beside the cemetery path, the cat waits, gazing from her sturdy perch of stone for people, mourners, tourists, poets, that come walking, grouped together or alone. She's sure here in this place of steady green that she will be protected, warmed, and fed where pale gray monuments, kept safe and clean, provide world recognition of the dead. Does she take comfort in a soft, strong voice, reciting sonnets penned by the young man who's buried here, his dear friend's loving choice, where beauty thrives as only beauty can? She seems to purr, to listen, with her face turned upward in this simple, sacred space. A morning that Eric and I cherish in our memory being in Rome was going to the Sunday market. 14, and Antonia, I'm sure will correct me if I'm not pronouncing, 14 Gennaio. Gennaio. At noon, the church bells clang in Sunday light, just past the market where 1,000 things are heaped to tempt us. Prego, please, we might want leather, sweaters, old books, silver rings. I find my strega, La Befana, past, and you, black socks, packed firmly, 6 new pair. Then suddenly, old magic can work fast. A gold-stitched turquoise caftan dancers wear. American, are we odd strangers here as we seek rainbows? Smile when sky turns bright, move slowly, try to see what's far and near, exclaim when doorways sparkle into night. Dark hooded crows, 1,000 times more, 1,000 times more. 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 1 sleek cats, wild parakeets. We praise them all as we walk Rome's curved streets. I'm always looking for things, objects of interest that I can use to help other people write poems. So of course, I see a button on the street. Of course, I pick it up. It goes in my pocket, right? Tell me, buttons. Like the ones I found in Rome, picked up off the street. A round brown one, a square green one, each with 4 holes for filling with dreams, if a traveler dares. Rose ring parakeets had left them alone. Hooded crows had pecked, then dropped, each one between cobblestones. Only me with my bad hip limping kept my eyes down far enough. Each one nestled in my pocket. Each one began to color me. And did I dream? You bet your bootstraps. 4 times 4, I climbed new steps beyond old marble's holy reach. And finally, a poem that begins with an epigraph by Anthony Di Renzo in Pasquinades. It's so intense that it burns, doesn't it? Pomegranate. Let the seeds burst, he says. Allow the juice to spurt and stain and damage what it will. These words are a poet's advice to a traveler praising the stone of Rome. Perhaps the poet wants to free him, or perhaps the poet wants to delude the traveler into feeling safe. What harm can a few smooth seeds, chewed and swallowed, do to him? Persephone is an old Greek story. The brilliant crimson bulging here belongs to Italy's gods. And now to turn it over to traveler and food artiste, Barbara Adams.
And you're still on mute.
I did. Thank you, Katharyn. Okay. Hi, everyone. Like Katharyn and Eric, I've been smitten by Rome. I teach travel writing and food writing, 2 genres that I love to read, but when I travel for myself, my response is in images, photography. And I thought I would like to share a bit about my own Italian journey, its origins. My own Roman story begins some 60 years ago when I graduated from college a semester early and spent that spring studying in southern France. I'd never been out of the country and knew no one who had, except my father, who'd been stationed in England during the war. In France, I became friends with an Italian girl, and for our spring break, she invited me to her home in northern Italy. When we landed at Torino's train station, I was unnerved. Everyone in the Bast Hall was staring at us. Well, the men were. When I asked Silvana what was wrong, she said gaily, "Caro, siamo in Italia." Sweetie, we're in Italy. And that was my introduction to a country I would visit for many years to come. After a few lovely days with her family, I traveled south, first to Venice, where I recall staying at a magical place with a golden door buried in a shrubbery wall, and then to Siena, where I insisted it was so clean you could eat off the streets, then to Florence, and to an unforgettable interlude with a young Italian artist who took me to Pisa, where we climbed the Leaning Tower, you still could do that then, and dallied in his studio with its soothing smell of turpentine. Then to Assisi, arriving at dawn and hitching a ride up the hillside to Giotto's frescoes on the back of a stranger's motorcycle. And finally, Rome. Now, I'm going to try and do the PowerPoint, but I'm not so great at that. So insert, play, slideshow. Okay, all right. I can't walk, I can't read and move at the same time. So can you, oh, you can't see it, right? No, wait a minute. Can anyone, nobody can talk. Let's see.
We can't see it yet.
Yes,
Just
it is
click-
because I have not shared my screen.
Ah,
Okay, let me see how to share the screen. I'm sorry. Okay, so the screen, view, slideshow. Can you see it now?
no, and I know we can do it because we did it before,
I
right?
know we can, yeah.
So when you click share, do you
Uh-huh.
see the slideshow?
Okay,
on
now
there?
click share.
Oh, there you go. See?
All right,
Perfect.
thank you. Okay, so finally I reached Rome on that trip down. But finally Rome, where my first memories are now mingled with those of successive summers. The iconic and satisfying smell of diesel fuel from the buses everywhere. The glow of the buildings in the constant sun, white and ochre and burnt sienna. Ruins and gardens and arches, hundreds of ornate churches, fountains and flowing water, marble sculptures everywhere, a living museum. I remember first seeing the Ludovisi throne, how do I move my thing now? There, sorry. That's the Ludovisi throne. It's a 2,000-year-old block of marble depicting Aphrodite rising from the sea. And I can swear it was still situated outdoors then, outdoors. Maybe it was a copy, but I don't think so. Having grown up on and around gray military bases, I was overjoyed to discover a landscape, both natural and human-made, that was devoted to beauty everywhere I looked. My childhood home had neither art nor music, and so in Rome, I absorbed art in the museums and on the streets like a starving person, and I still do. That first summer, I lived in a spacious room in Via Frattina for $3 a night. It's now a very high-end fashion district, just a few doors down from where James Joyce stayed during his unhappy visit to Rome. He complained to his brother, "Rome reminds me of a man who lives by exhibiting to travelers his grandmother's corpse." Raised as a Catholic, I was inured to the mummified bodies, relics glassed in under church altars. And I was just a block away from Piazza di Spagna that you saw earlier, and the house where John Keats died, now a mesmerizing museum, a destination for decades of literary pilgrims. I spent my days wandering the city and my evenings with a Roman boy who shared all his favorite places, like a lively trattoria in the countryside where people danced to folk tunes, or the unadorned Gothic abbey of Fossanova, whose stunning simplicity made me take a quiet vow to marry there someday. I never did. Rome and its wonders kept me coming back the next 3 summers. And then, with graduate school and teaching, life got in the way, and I didn't return again for a decade. By then, the Roman boy and I both had other partners, and no longer traveling solo, I felt less free. Things were different. Years passed, and I became afraid to revisit Rome because it had become the place of my youth. Returning, I could only be regretful and disappointed, and life already had enough disillusionments. Then a few years ago, about 2017, my sister, with whom I travel often, suggested spending time abroad living in a city, and somehow we both chose Rome. I was so apprehensive, needlessly. I learned what all travelers should remember, that you can go home again. We found a cozy apartment filled with books and arts, became fast friends with the owners, there they are, true Romani, and returned summer after summer until the pandemic, and then again after that cloud lifted. What is it that drives us repeatedly to Rome? Consider Rome, Caput Mundi, the capital of the world, at its largest. 2,000 years ago, its empire spread through Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, touching and being touched by all those cultures over 3 millennia of history, and you can still view remnants of all that. I can't imagine being bored in Rome. It reminds me of Shakespeare's play when Enobarbus said Mark Antony would never tire of Cleopatra. Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety. In Rome, I am a tourist trying hard to be a traveler. When we arrive each May on day one, we first head for the splendid Rosetto Comunale, the public rose gardens on the hillside overlooking the Circo Massimo, where in antiquity chariots raced and enslaved men sometimes won their liberty. It was built on Jewish ruins of a Jewish cemetery. There's acknowledgement of that. And that's the Circo Massimo. To be anywhere in Rome is time traveling. You're simultaneously immersed in both past and present. We're at the gardens because the roses will only last another week or two, their blooms furling and fading. And that is an essential, essential aspect of being in Rome, the constant poignant awareness of all that has once been. Travelers have been drawn to this for centuries and artists inspired by it, the romantic lure of ruins. Let me go back for a moment to Florence, that first visit in the late 60s in the room where I was staying. The middle-aged cleaning woman and I were sitting on my bed chatting. Suddenly, she opened her purse and pulled out a framed sepia photograph. The young woman in the image was stunningly beautiful. I thought it was a movie star she admired. Then she pointed to her chest, affirming it was her younger self. And she said, "Ah, signorina, tutto passa, tutto passa. Everything passes, everything passes." At 21, I was just at the very tip of beginning to understand this. Today, that knowledge is a daily companion, which is partly why I find Rome so comforting. Goethe knew it too, and he understood the peace that this city brings. This is a quote from his Italian journal from the late 1780s. "I am now in a state of clarity and calm such as I had not known for a long time. My habit of looking at and accepting things as they are without pretension is standing me in good stead and makes me secretly very happy. Each day brings me some new remarkable object, some new great picture, and a whole city which the imagination will never encompass, however long one thinks and dreams." When friends plan to go to Rome for the first time and ask me for suggestions, I have lists and lists to share. First, a map of the best gelato sites, given to me by a former student. By the way, I have to say, you can eat all the pasta and gelato you want, and you never gain weight. I always lose weight in Rome. Okay. Tell them about trattorias, where the house table wine is just fine. This is one of our favorites. And the spaghetti carbonara, memorable. Or its lighter cousin, pasta alla gricia, which I also recommend. I tell them why the small Villa Farnesina is the only museum they must not miss, or the glowing bamboo forest in the botanical garden, or the tranquil and lush non-Catholic cemetery, as the Romans call it, with the graves of Keats and Shelley near the White Pyramid of Caius Cestius. That's my neighborhood in Rome, just beyond the Aurelian walls. Keats's grave with the quote that Katharyn read, and that of his friend Joseph Severin next to him. Not sure what's next. Oh, yes. Oh, and they must see the French cannonball lodged in the steps inside the Baroque Galleria Colonna, or, like this, the Caravaggios, which are scattered all over the city. And if you see nothing else, you must go to the Pantheon and just breathe. But of course, my suggestions reflect my interests and experiences, not yours. The best advice any traveler can give is this: expect nothing. Be open to everything. Be fully present, and as best you can, forget time. You can read all the famous travel memoirs about Rome, like Goethe's or Henry James, but finally, you make your own memories. Currently, there's an ad online by Travel Texas, and it shows a bunch of rowdy people in various locales having a heck of a good time. And at one point, one of the people turns to the viewer and says, "This is our trip to Texas. Get your own." And you will. Your Rome is not mine. It's not any of ours. As nor any of ours, as travelers over the years have discovered. Rome has always been what it was officially designated as amidst the destruction and chaos of World War II, an open city. And Antonio, it's all yours.
Um, here we go.
Okay, well, after such a feast of words, it's time for some espresso, right? So what I'd like to do is share my screen and call up my slideshow. And I call this little bit Promenades and Pasquinades, Confessions of a Caffeinated Flaneur, and about walking the streets of Rome. And Rome is the most walkable city in Italy, I think. Here we are in the northern gate, looking out of the Piazza del Popolo at the Tridente, the three main avenues that branch out from this northern piazza, all to the other squares of Rome, all the way down. So Rome, its central district, is just a series of interconnecting, gorgeous Baroque squares. Also lined with these marvelous, marvelous cafeterias, the wonderful and cafes and coffee shops. The life of Rome spills out into the streets, and you need a lot of energy for that, which is why coffee is such an important thing in Rome. Drinking coffee and taking in news, which makes Romans an extremely caffeinated, talkative, opinionated bunch. And that's not surprising because Rome is very much a city made up of words. The words are literally in the stones, whether you're thinking of 2,000-year-old graffitis or modern wisecracks on the walls themselves. Romans to this day are great social commentators. So although the younger Romans still like to post using social media, the older Romans like to post using the basis of statues, the so-called talking statues of Rome. Of these, the most famous and the most beloved is a 2,000-year-old ruin called Pasquino, who stands right off of Piazza Navona in a tiny square, right off these two streets, the wider of which, the Via del Governo Vecchio, used to be the old parade route for the Papal States. So both papal processions for newly elected popes and death marches going to executions would stop at this statue in order to gain its blessing and its nods. So this statue of Pasquino is something of a landmark in the city and has been ever since it was unearthed in April Fool's Day of 1501 by a Neapolitan cardinal who was building a palazzo right off this square. They found the two battered trunks that probably formed a dual statue of King Menelaus holding the body of Patroclus from the battlefield of the Iliad. But this old relic, this ruin, became a kind of public bulletin board. And people loved to make a lot of comments back then. So this was the time when Rodrigo Borgia became Pope Alexander VI, a time of great scandal in the Vatican. And many great writers of the time period adopted the persona of the, Pasquino, to satirize the Pope and the clergy, which is why to this day, the word Pasquinade for a lampoon posted in public or satire or libel takes its name from Pasquino. And that is why I named my collection of essays on Rome Pasquinades. They're originally a series of columns that appeared in the bilingual Italian-American newspaper Little Americano from 2013 to 2020. And Cayuga Lake Books, a regional press, published this collection in fall of 2023. So what I'd like to do is go toward one section of the book. Pasquino kind of spawned a whole literary tradition that's not like the finer stuff that you see in Florence and Milan, but is more related to the coffee houses of gossip and the tabloid journalism that marks the literary life of Rome for the past 300, 400 years. It's a sequence called Cafe Society. One of the coffee houses that is featured there is this literary monument, Cafe Greco, which is the oldest coffee house in Rome, founded in 1760. If you go into this place, it literally is like stepping back into time. So here's the front porch, which seems very, very conventional, but as you go back into those damask-colored rooms, you literally go back and back into time. A time when people like Goethe would come to be in the coffee house, and they now create special blends of coffee named after the great writers who visited here. There's the Cafe Greco Goethe blend. You can actually see the booth where Gogol composed most of Dead Souls. But the most beloved writers, of course, were the great Roman dialect poets like Belli and Triluza, that helped make the Greco a kind of literary landmark. Every Wednesday of the first week of the month, a group of Romanistas, that is, lovers of Rome, gather to have the great talks about the history of the city that I would always love to eavesdrop in on. And a lot of that talk inspired most of the essays in this book. I'd like to read from one of them, which is about my favorite coffee house in Rome that doesn't have any literary pretensions. It really makes the best coffee in the city. It's called Heaven in a Cup. Pasquino worships at his favorite espresso bar. Outside Cafe San Eustachio, my favorite espresso bar in Rome's historic center, students and cabbies, bankers and brokers, pundits and senators sip coffee and mock the news. Starbucks, the US chain with 32,600 locations worldwide, including Milan, God help us, plans to open its first 2 coffee houses in the Eternal City, one near the Vatican Museums, the other between the Pantheon and the Trevi Fountain in Piazza San Silvestro, the one that you see here. Blasphemy, pronounces a silver-haired archivist from the Palazzo della Sapienza. He stirs his demitasse and flicks a froth of crema on the sidewalk. What next, do you suppose? He flares the nostrils of his aquiline nose. Will Starbucks place an inflatable mermaid in the Trevi Fountain to attract customers? Everybody brays, except me. Since the Trevi Fountain is already sponsored by Fendi, the Italian fashion house that paid for its 2.2 million euro restoration, such crass advertising is quite possible. A solemn little priest, dressed in a cassock, raises a hand and restores order. The circular brim of his black felt hat, I notice, resembles the saucer's balance on his lap. No mermaid will appear, he assures us. Keep the faith. And he points to a mosaic paving the cafe's entrance, a stag's head with a cross between its antlers. Our bar takes its name and emblem from a nearby church dedicated to the 1st century martyr, St. Eustace, patron of hunters. Starbucks may be a $14 billion multinational corporation, but Cafe San Eustachio, Rome's most popular coffee house, is a cult. During the reign of the Emperor Trajan, a Roman general named Placidus often hunted deer in the forest near Tivoli. One day he saw a cross glowing between the horns of a stag and converted to Christianity. He baptized his entire family, changed his name to Eustace, and adopted the stag and cross as his crest. Too bad he never copyrighted it. His descendants would have made a fortune. This crest is now the cafe's logo stamped on all its merch. Trajan tolerated the general's eccentricities until they interfered with his duties. When Eustace refused to offer incense to the pagan gods at a public ceremony, the emperor ordered him to be roasted alive inside a bronze bull. With gruesome aptness, his church in Piazza San Eustachio, the site of his martyrdom, is filled day and night with the incense of burning oak and toasted coffee beans from local espresso bars. The area boasts many fine cafes. Tazza d'Oro, San Eustachio's biggest rival, rules in summer, thanks to its Granita di Cafe, frozen coffee interlaced with layers of whipped cream. Camaleone, which is right next door, a small and unpretentious place, serves handmade, exquisite chocolate dolce. Giulietti, a fashionable ice cream parlor since the Belle Époque, features a golden salon and tunic servers, but only San Eustachio enshrines a retro coffee culture. Opened in 1938, the establishment replaced a failing 19th century bar called Caffè e Latte. For a modern look, Alberto Ottolini, the new proprietor, used floor tiles with geometric spaces. The industrial white walls, zinc fixtures, and lack of chairs and tables made the interior resemble a train station. Streamlined and efficient, the cafe served 5,000 espresso shots a day. But all innovation becomes tradition. When Raimondo and Roberto Ricci took over in 1999, they kept the hand-cracked grinders, black and white photos, art moderne clock, and semicircular bar. The cups and saucers stamped with a stag and cross became popular gifts. For cafenistas, they're neither souvenirs nor status symbols, but relics from a temple. Screens surround the bar's espresso machine, like the chancel screen separating the tabernacle from the congregation in early medieval basilicas. Behind them, the high priest of coffee, wearing snappy bow ties and burgundy vests, concoct a sacred brew amid steam and tinkling spoons. Like most believers, I choose not to question the mystery. Nobody knows the secret of San Eustachio's Grand Cafe, a double espresso with a creamy, thick head, thick enough to turn a smooth-lipped nun into Bialetti Man, the mustachio trademark of a coffee machine company. God knows I've asked about this enigma. Some people say it's the water from the Aqua Virgine, the aqueduct built by Marcus Vesenius Agrippa, general and son-in-law of Augustus, which supplies the Pantheon district from a pure spring in the Alban Hills, 8 miles east of Rome. According to legend, a maiden discovered and led thirsty legionnaires to this site, hence its name, virgin water. Others credit the mix. San Eustachio blends the best imported beans from Brazil, the Dominican Republic, Ethiopia, Galapagos, Guatemala, and Santa Helena, and roasts them in an 80-year-old hand-operated wood-fueled machine. This colossal cylinder resembles the brazen bull in which Trajan tortured St. Eustace. As the beans rotate, crack, and toast, 2 interns from the American Academy's Rome Sustainable Food Project try to figure out the recipe. Does the barista add powdered milk to the grinds? Does he beat the cream, sugar, and coffee together? Such vain speculations fitter from Silicon Valley than Seven Hills amuse the Ricci brothers. The Vatican permanently damaged its brand when it substituted Latin with the vernacular and made priests face the congregation. The Riccis will never make the same kind of mistake. Customers prefer ritual and mystery. Although the church removed Eustace from the liturgical calendar in 1969, the faithful still celebrate his feast every year on September 20th, ideally with a cup of espresso. The year Joseph Ratzinger became Benedict XVI, pilgrims from Doggendorf, Germany, worshipped at the Basilica of San Eustachio and then stopped at the bar. The guide, a member of the Bavarian Forest Club, removed the bottle of Jägermeister from his backpack, showed the regulars the label with the cross and stag, and poured a shot in his espresso. Delighted, everyone ordered the same caffè corretto. If Ratzinger had partaken of the sacrament, I'd like to tell the faithful, he might not have resigned. Okay, everyone. So now it's time to open things up to questions. I think we can now move to full screen. So we don't have to do lunch, but if we could, maybe we could just see everyone in view now in gallery, and we could just field questions or begin conversations.
Everyone is still muted. Peter,
Oh, but you can unmute. I think you can unmute now, I
I
think.
think I'm vocable.
Mhm.
Yeah, they are. You're vocable, definitely.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Just it was a great, wonderfully compressed visit to Rome. Brings back many memories, and those are my memories, but thank you for sharing yours. So, Antonio, I have a question for you about Saint Eustace, right? So, I mean,
Yes.
he's one of my favorites, especially the vision of the stag.
Right.
Do you know the Durer lithograph, by the way, of the vision of Saint Eustace?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's
I
terrific.
do. It's really
Why did they
striking.
remove him from the calendar you just mentioned?
That's right, because there's no historical proof that he existed, unlike Saint Lawrence. They actually have records of
Oh.
some of those very early saints that were in the liturgy. But then when you don't have any relics, that was part of the Vatican II reform to
I
get
see.
rid of everything that's not anchored in history. But his cult is still there. Everybody,
Yeah.
that whole district of Rome, right off the Pantheon, is called Rione San Eustachio.
Yeah,
And so they're not going to wait. They're not going to take away the seal of that saint
right.
as thing. It'll go on, but it'll just be a kind of legend rather than something that the church recognizes as an official cult.
Like Saint Christopher.
Like Saint Christopher too, which that doesn't seem to be. It seems to be more like a folk tale, a pun.
Well, thank you again. Anyway, I always learn something. From your book, which I've read several times, but also from your charming presentations. Thank you.
All right. Somebody else?
I have a question.
Certo.
Yeah, I was wondering, it seems like I was wondering how the Italian language influenced how you crafted the rhythm of your poem.
My first language is, well, not really Italian, but Sicilian, I would say, is a Romanesco. So those different sub dialects, I guess they call them now dialects, though. Those tongues are actually older than the official Italian language. So there's that beneath my English, and beneath that speech, which is derived from Demotic Latin, is the Latin, right? So the rhythms of my writing are very strange because they're formed by those other languages. So people often talk that, you write with an accent. I can hear your English is not your first language. And you can hear in the way I speak still, even after all these years. I'm a doctor in American literature, and I've been here since I was born here. But it doesn't matter. I still sound like a foreigner when I speak, or even when I write. So that's a very, very astute of you.
Yeah, I was struck struck by it was great though. I enjoyed hearing. I've never been to Rome, so I felt like I was there.
Right. Yes, please.
Hi there. I'm Vince DiGirolamo down in Setauket, Long Island. Thank you
Yes,
guys
Vince,
very
it's
much.
good to see you. I haven't seen you in years.
It's been a while. So no, I enjoyed the mix, the memoir, the poetry, the essays. I was moved to think about what a historian friend of mine said, that Rome is the most important 500 square miles in world history.
Wow.
I don't know. What if you could comment on that and that idea? I mean, from your work, I really get the sense that you guys are very much aware when you're there of walking and entering a story that long preceded you, that will long succeed you. But that sense of the presence of the past everywhere you look, that kind of consciousness. Is it the most important 500 square miles? Not to be sort of ethnocentric or provincial, but in relation to other cities and other places. Thanks.
Barbara, you absolutely have to take this one first, because that your whole talk was about that. And
well, I mean, many people argue yes, but there are also civilizations that predate Rome
absolutely
that we have just that bear traces of some of them in the Middle East and further east that were also phenomenally large and influential in their time, but there's no question that for us Westerners, the Rome has affected almost everything, I think.
But it's also almost an archetypal city, right? This is something that Jung and Freud talk about in their work, and the way that they discuss Rome almost as a psychological trope in the collective unconscious of Western minds. But for me, Rome is more a way of seeing things. So here in Ithaca, even, there are ways of seeing the past in the present if we only have the eyes to do so. So I think that's really the thing that you most need to come away from Rome, that attitude to see that you're really a walking and living archaeological mound. And that's not the way that this culture, there's very much this consumer culture that always puts us in the now, so that we forget about the past and don't think about the future, so that we buy the next shiny thing. So that's really what Rome is the great antidote to.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I have a question for Eric and Katharyn. So I remember when you were getting ready to go on this trip, I think this was the first time for both of you that you'd gone to Rome. Is that true?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I know that when I've gone on journeys to places, there's sort of like three parts I recall, and I wonder if this resonates for you. There's the anticipation, and you read a lot about it, and you look at photographs, and you talk to people, and then you're there, and maybe as Barbara so beautifully wrote in her essay, you're simply there and ready for whatever happens, and it's exciting and new, and then you digest it and actually find that it really continues to resonate for a long time. And I'm wondering for both of you, Katharyn and Eric, are you still considering Rome? Is it still coming into your dreams and your poems? I wonder if both of you might speak about that.
Dreams. I think so, Peter. I can't say that I've written any more poems recently about it. My trip, unfortunately, was dampened by getting COVID for the second time. That seemed to have a few people who were from the group we were in, they were suffering from it, and it hit me. So there's that edge of, oh my goodness, so the surreal quality of remembering the parts that worked so beautifully. And for me, the memory in my body memory of the walking, and the walking, and the pasta and the wine resonate for sure.
And Peter, I would agree, those three stages of being a traveler that you described, I think those are very accurate. I also think of how I introduced talking about the ordinary and extraordinary because of being comfortable here in Ithaca and then going to a brand new place. There's still stories there that I have notes in my notebook to write poems about. I went there with the intention of writing a crown of sonnets based on the embalmed hearts of the past popes that are in one of the churches there.
Right.
And I went a completely different way, and I went into doorways. I started writing about doorways. So yeah, it's definitely on my mind again to go back, as is Slovenia, which is one of my other favorite spots to be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Peter, I think one of the ways I know I tried to keep Rome with me is through the food. I mean, except for the coffee, we haven't talked very much about food, but it's a very important part of the experience in Italy. And I mean, I've had so many people say, I never tasted an egg until I had one in Italy. I never tasted a tomato until I had one in Italy. And it kind of spoils you for going to Italian restaurants in the States, I'm afraid. And so, I mean, I fill my suitcase with a year's worth of pasta and olive oil and balsamic and stuff and bring it home and try and cook, you know. And that's just one part of the food, obviously. The specialty dishes and sweets are very complicated. Yeah. But that taste sensation brings back, and also just the good feeling, because eating is such a convivial thing, you know, and it brings back the memory of those meals with friends. And yeah,
Well, the
You go
dish,
back regularly, right?
every year. Yeah.
Yeah. Bravo.
Right, bravo.
Yeah.
dish that Eric talked about, he's still perfecting at home, the cacio e pepe.
Cacio e pepe.
Yeah.
Antonio calls, oh, the Roman macaroni and cheese.
Roman mac and cheese, which is like something new.
It's all you need in life, folks. One bowl a day, that's it.
So, Antonio, when you were talking about the pace and rhythm of your writing, because of the other languages that you had in your very being, it reminded me a little bit of Jhumpa Lahiri.
Oh,
She's
yes.
originally Bengali, but she
Right.
grew up speaking English in London, and she wrote some wonderful short stories and novels in English. But then she moved to Italy
Right.
because what did she say? I think she said she wanted to have the freedom to be imperfect. She started writing in Italian before she really was fluent in it, and that's really being brave. It's kind of like what you were talking about. The ordinary becomes the extraordinary when you're doing something different from usual, and I think she's really brave to do that.
So her Roman stories, which just came out in English just last year, and was on the New York Times bestselling list. They're just marvelous. So it's a real homage to Alberto Moravia and his Roman stories. That he has a series of 50 monologues that he wrote in the very early 60s that kind of cut across all the class lines of Rome. And she goes back and she visits it from the people who are new to Rome, these outsiders. And yet in a way that she has completely surrendered herself to the city. And if you've heard her speak Italian, it's remarkable. She's so fluent, and the accent is perfect. But she's not only learning Italian, she's picking up Romanesco as well. She's very much adapted herself to her new city in wonderful ways. But there's a large Indian population in Rome. Indians tend to love Rome a great deal because it just reminds them so much of Dubai and Bengala, those wonderful, wonderful cities.
So what's the name of that new book by Jhumpa Lahiri? What did you say the name of it?
Roman Stories.
Roman Stories.
It's called Roman Stories. Are there any more questions? Yes, please, Cynthia. Good to see you.
Yes, great to see you too.
And you're a real Romanista. You really love going there, though you love Castel Gandolfo even more so, I think.
Well, the Castelli
Yeah. Oh, the Castelli regions, yes.
Yeah, we lived in several different locations there, Frascati and Monteportio and a few other places, Nemi.
Sure.
So it, yeah, all of these images and stories, you know, the cats and that are fed by the little old ladies that walk out every morning, you know, and set out these dishes, really brings back a lot of kind of poignant memories. But we had this kind of love-hate relationship with living there because
course.
it's not an easy place to live. So I was
No.
just curious. I was just curious whether you are drawn to do something like retire there or like live in an extended period, or because it's such an obvious love affair and long relationship, you know, deep relationship that we never had with the city and with Italy in general. So I was curious about that.
all my young cousins, so almost all my surviving relatives now live in Rome.
Ah,
So on both sides of my family, they're almost all dead now. So these younger cousins, second and third cousins, some of whom I've never met in person, I've only corresponded with, are in Rome. And I'm sure they would welcome me there if I went, but Rome has become very, very big, and I've become very, very frail. So I do not know if I could ever live there. If I would ever go back to Italy, I would probably go to Vasto, with that beautiful seaside
mhm.
town in the coast of Abruzzi. But I certainly want to see Rome, to go to Rome as much as I could.
Mhm.
Um, you know, but in some ways I haven't left. If you read the papers every day, you're not there. If you're Facebooking and you're messaging, you're still somehow connected to that place.
Right. Well, living in the beautiful part of the city is very, very expensive. And it's also wall-to-wall tourists.
Right.
So, you know, there's that issue, but it's a magical place of our hearts, definitely.
Right. But
Yeah.
to bring Rome here, right? So I like to say, so I left, so I've given up 4 hills for 3, but you know, to take the 3 that I had here. But it's about the life in the streets, right? So the way that the life spills out in the commons, for instance, there's this kind of old world feel to that. There's even a kind of old world feel sometimes to Wegmans when I go there. If you see with those eyes,
Mm.
right? That's really what Rome gives you to appreciate life in some ways. And as you said, it more than this sort of love-hate relationship, but it's the way that the beauty comes out of the tragedy, right? The laughter comes out of the
That's
grief,
right.
right?
The
And
passion.
that,
Yeah,
right.
the trauma.
But in America, the things are always split and out and separated in that way, where everything is mixed together. In Rome, and that allows you, as I put in the epilogue of my book, to accept your own mixedness in a way that America always asks you to straighten yourself out. Whereas Rome just loves all those little crooked little side streets. And you know, it's okay, you can be all those little crooked little side streets if you want.
So long as you are well dressed.
As long as you, of course, you got to make a bella figura, but everybody does, and it's nothing to do with income. Everybody, you know,
Yeah.
everybody has a sense of style in
That's
that
right.
city.
Right.
So Antonio, you gotta tell us where in Wegmans you go to get that Roman feeling, because I don't know about everybody else. I don't get that feeling when I go to Wegmans.
Well, certainly in the summer when the organic farms really flood the produce section, there's the sense of that, right?
Mm.
When they are more tasteful in the way that they put out their cold cuts and some of the better imported cold cuts at Romans. And what strikes me now is so many of the people at Roma in Wegmans now are very knowledgeable about those imported foods in a way that just baffle me. I know that it goes beyond just being trained in the company literature to do that. They've obviously started tasting the wares themselves and are now converts and want to spread the gospel. And that's okay by me. So it's nice to have people take pleasure in those things. We have just 5 more minutes. So we began with a view of the Spanish Steps and the Azalea Festival. Why don't we end with a little clip that I put together of the flowers there for like a minute or 2, and then we'll say our goodbyes. Okay, let me again share my screen. Call up this video.